Hello and welcome back to the Free Life Agents podcast. This should be FLA number 34, and we're going to be talking all about influence, persuasion, sales, communication skills, different things like that. Obviously, as entrepreneurs and real estate agents, you have to be able to sell. You have to be able to convince other people to do what you want them to do, especially in a non-invasive way. And in my opinion, I believe influence is probably the most important asset an individual can have as well. So today we're going to bring on a guest who is an expert in this subject. And what better guest to bring on than somebody who literally does this for a living? So today my guest is a expert magician. His name is David Ranalli. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem, David. I'm super excited. I think this is going to be a no pun intended a magical episode. But
Hey,
it's kind of a joke that fell flat, but I did it on purpose. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, kind of
good
introduce
job.
yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you. But no, like kind of introduce yourself, David, a little bit. Tell us,
Sure.
a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into being a magician. That's actually pretty cool industry.
Sure. I am a professional magician. I'm 34 years old. I have been doing magic since I was 13, growing up in Chicago. And I went to go see David Copperfield, the great David Copperfield. You might have heard of him. And I was blown away by his show. Like there was there's one trick in particular. He was on stage and there were these two very beautiful women on stage and he just like makes them vanish and they were gone. And supposedly they're still missing. But who knows where they are? But I mean, that moment was just the way that vanish just was. It was just like I can't believe this is like something real that I'm, but not real that I'm looking. I just couldn't really comprehend it. So I was like, I have to meet him. So I snuck into his meet and greet after the show and got to shake his hand. The rest is history. And I started doing magic in restaurants about a year later, and so like going up to the tables, working my way up to doing shows and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that was kind of like the beginning history. And then later in college, I actually went on a scholarship from the Society of American Magicians. They actually have scholarships. And so I was able to go and I studied. I wanted to study marketing because I was like, well, if I can market myself, then I can be a professional magician. But I also was really intrigued by the psychological aspects of it and a lot of the ties to magic that were there in regards to communication, persuasion, electronic media, and how people influence each other through that. What is this electronic media that we're using all day long? Those types of things really fascinated me. And I actually was part of one of the first cell phone addiction studies when smartphones first came out, and we did like a kind of a test on the campus and observed the way that people were behaving with the smartphones and how it was distracting them from other things and really creating a new perception of reality, I guess if you can put it that way. And then after college, started doing more like corporate events and larger conferences. I host a monthly show here in Indianapolis, and I'm also taking it to a few other places. And so, yeah, this is what I do for a living. So,
That's awesome, man. I mean, I always wanted to meet like a professional magician. I'm grateful that you're here and doing this podcast with me. But so like, kind of walk us through that a little bit. You said that you had a background essentially in college of kind of studying influence. How does that kind of tie into? And you don't have to reveal like all of your tricks and all of the secrets of the magic business, but magicians, I mean, that's what they do, right? You're essentially in it to influence people to think a certain way, to keep their focus and attention on something while you work on other things in the background. So how does that kind of, from a
right.
basic standpoint, from somebody who's never heard of this before, how can somebody understand that perspective of influence?
Well, I mean, influence can be many things. The way that I like to think about it is there's three levels of influence, technically four, but there's three. There's yourself, you influencing not just yourself, like to like motivate yourself to do something, but to also embody a sense of being an influential person, to sort of believe in yourself that you have this sense of identity that you can go into the world and do extraordinary things. It's a very important thing. And then there's another layer to it, which is the sort of the social, cultural between each other influence that takes place, where we're influencing each other. Just I mean, the fact that we're communicating right now, where I'm influencing you to understand what I'm talking about, and you're listening and maybe you'll respond to what I have to say. And so there's this weird energetic flow that language and expression takes place between us. And that can get really bogged down when we meet people that we don't understand, or if we don't have an understanding of what they're talking about, or we don't value what they're talking about. Things can get very muddy. And then you throw in electronic media and signs and brochures and just, like the layers of how we're communicating can get really, really amped up to the point that we can, lose connection between each other and ourselves of what we value for ourselves. So it's really important that we understand how influence plays a role for ourselves and between each other, because at the end of the day, there's another layer of influences. We're trying to influence the world. Human beings impact the world all the time. Climate change is a perfect example of this, where there's sort of the non-human elements at play where we're interacting with them and it's having a larger effect. And so there's so but at the same time, creating technology is kind of changing the world, because we're creating these automatronic things made out of the earth that also influence us to do other things too. So it can get very, very complicated when you think about the global implications of it. But that's why somebody like Elon Musk, is able to do so many big things, is because he laser focuses on one big thing, a technology or a purpose or something, and he goes for it and makes that happen. Nobody else is doing it, but he decided to do it. So it's that commitment to that, to a vision on a bigger scale of making something happen. So, we have ourselves, we have each other, and then a bigger vision for the world around us.
Right. That's actually a really good kind of perspective to think about influence in, because it's not one dimensional, right? Because when other people think about influence, I think what most people kind of default to in their mind is, how can I get somebody to do something? And that's like what most people define influence as, is how can I convince and
Yeah,
persuade somebody?
persuade
Right.
somebody. Yeah, and that is an important element to it. That no doubt we're going to talk about that. But before we even get into that,
Mhm.
sometimes it's very interesting. The more that I've thought about and learned about the way that people behave, sometimes we're trying to get something out of somebody else when really we need to be getting it out of ourselves. We're trying to get it from somebody else when we're trying to get, or maybe we need to bypass other people and we need to go just straight to, maybe that larger vision or something like that. And we're maybe working through people that we don't need to be working through. So there's no right answer for anything. Unfortunately, the more you try to understand something, the more mysterious it becomes. But the cool part about being good with yourself and being in an environment that fosters you to be good with yourself, it means that you can contribute more than you're trying to just take. Because persuasion, when we're working with each other, sometimes we really think about things in terms of like, how can I get something out of this person? And we don't think, well, maybe me giving something to them could be a nice start and build trust and get that thing that I want without trying to force it to happen, or force it out of one person, when you could just be putting your feelers out to a lot of different people and get different sort of pingbacks to what your overall purpose is. So
Right. That's a great point. Because I mean, a lot of people, and I've heard this said before, is that the most influential person is the most confident person in a
mm,
situation. And I think confidence breeds from, or it starts from, just being okay with yourself, like you said, understanding and being clear on what you want, and then also being clear on why it is that you want it, right? So like that's a really good example you gave a little bit earlier on of Elon Musk, because I think a lot of people will think like, why can he influence so many people? Like he's not any different than us, right? Like what traits do like a very influential person possess that non-influential people, don't possess?
right. Well, everybody, Jane Goodall, are you familiar with Jane Goodall? She was a biologist and she studied
Right.
chimpanzees and all
Hmm.
this. She makes a great point that everybody's always influencing the world every single day. All of your choices create a reaction. Whether you stay at home, if you stay at home and do nothing, the reaction is the world doesn't know about you. There's still a reaction. If you go out into the world, you are making a reaction where you're impacting other people. So the choice of knowing what we want to do with ourselves becomes very, very important. And I think that too many people who are trying to become influential, I mean, even as a performer, like sometimes you tend to cop, oh, you sort of have to copy other performers in the beginning so that you can learn yourself. You get the confidence by trying to do something that's been done before, and it frees you up to go do the thing that has never been done before. So uh, yeah, I hope that tied into what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, it does because like I think something that like I don't think this is just within like the real estate industry or like for real estate agents, but like in the marketing industry in general, or just entrepreneurs and business owners, they always have this term called rip off and duplicate, R&D, where they'll find somebody else who's doing something either in a similar industry or on a similar platform, and they'll see that they're having a lot of success, and then they just rip off what they're doing and then duplicate it either within their own industry or their own market or whatever it might be. And I think that kind of ties into it where, I mean, do you think it's a good idea to start off that way, or do you have like a different opinion, I'm
Well,
guessing?
there's a really great book out there. I thought I got it right over here. I think it's Steal Like an Artist. And
Right.
it's the kind of thing where, like, after reading that book, I kind of got an idea. Like, I mean, the book's great, but I sort of distilled down for myself of like what I think creativity is. And I think it's sort of like it's like one thing plus a new thing plus my thing equals this thing that we call creativity.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you can't, we don't exist in a vacuum, and at the end of the day, human beings, we all need the same resources: land, food, shelter, love, all of those things, finance, security.
Right.
And I think that we're all trying to find something that we can latch onto, even in our most insecure moments, And so when you're in an insecure moment, it does sort of help to either embody or just ride the coattails of somebody who is already doing it, who sees your potential, who can lift you up. And I've had many mentors over the years who've been there for me in that way. And that's an important thing to learn to ask for when you need that kind of help, or just to reach out to people, and things like that. So I think that, if you're not if it's okay to emulate, but it's not okay to just blatantly steal, and just to duplicate word for word exactly what somebody else is doing. That most certainly, why would you want that for yourself? I think is probably a better question. But that's where the importance of not hitting, um, I guess the publish button matters so much, like going out there with your face of like, this is my thing, when it's clearly somebody else's thing. Like sometimes you need to do, like when I'm learning magic, I do my best to do it for my family audience, which means either my literal family or friends of really close friends of mine. I work out of a group office, and we're like, it's like Lord of the Flies there, where everybody just like, everybody has their own business, but everybody's also like helping each other. And that's kind of like one of my family audiences, where I just practice magic before I get to the big stage, where I'm presenting this thing that is supposed to be unique. So
Right. Yeah, and that's really interesting as well because I think people misunderstand that term rip off and duplicate, and they do the thing that they're not supposed to do, which is just steal and copy.
yeah,
Right. But in
yeah,
reality, what they the right way to do it is essentially like what you're saying, where you're taking elements of it, but you're just piecing different things together that you've accumulated, right? Different knowledge, like different things that you've learned in the past, and you're just piecing it together and making something that's also unique. But there's nothing like, I think most of the times people when they're thinking of like creating something, they're thinking of new ideas, where in reality they're just organizing different ideas that they've gotten from other people and other places in a new way. I mean, is
yeah.
that do
Or
you think
as it
that's
applies to their life, or as it
right?
applies to maybe their niche marketplace. I mean, you do have to try to take something. I mean, something that has been useful for me is just to realize, okay, I know X types of magic, but this type of magic doesn't necessarily, like, it works great in this spot, but maybe there's a different audience that I could take it to who hasn't seen it before, and it becomes new to them, and that's really what culture is. We try to have these giant culture wars in society where everyone's claiming that they know what's best for each other and what goes in the books and all this stuff. But, really people are trying to take a sense of their soul and to express it and to also give that to other people. And if you're stuck in a pattern where you're just ripping off other people, or you're not seeing the value in taking something to just a different audience who may not, they will want to be sold on it. They need that idea. So don't be
Right.
afraid to take those ideas to new places.
Right. Like introducing
Yeah.
new ideas essentially to a new group, or introducing an idea to a new group of people essentially is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
There's lots of room for that.
Right.
So
Yeah, definitely. And let's kind of tie this in and kind of shift a little bit on topic here,
sure.
and talk more about like persuasion and, in a kind of like a one-on-one situation, right? Because and maybe you can tie it into like kind of the type of magic that you're doing, because sometimes there's close up. I know, like, I'm not like an expert on this, but there's like close up magic, and there's one that does like when in a bigger group. So in your opinion, like, what is something that what are some key points that an individual want to focus on in a one-on-one setting where they can essentially persuade the other party to do something that they wish to do without being invasive is the key.
Without being invasive. What do you mean by invasive?
Right. So like without being invasive, as in, without manipulating somebody to do something that they never wanted to do in the first place. And maybe
Mm,
that's a interesting kind of even deeper topic, going into, what is manipulation, right? And
sure.
what
Yeah.
really does it mean, right?
Right. This is where things really start to get kind of hairy because there are a lot of layers to like what it means to
Right.
persuade somebody for something because you can transform somebody's life based on just one interaction with them and they take off in that direction for many years potentially and that could distract them from the path that they were on before. If you take a God's eye view of the earth, there's people are just moving in different directions and stuff like that and we're mixing with each other and then going all over here. And if you look at a city, a city has all these lines on the ground specifically to tell us where to go. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's one of those things where like when you're trying to influence and persuade somebody, people are already on their path. They may be used to being on that path, but that may not necessarily even be the path that they want to be on. Many people
Right.
have that thing going on where they're stuck in a job or something that they don't like and they struggle to get out of that. I think that first of all, unless you have, if you're purely trying to just get stuff out of people, I think that that's exactly the recipe for manipulating somebody against their will. For trying to use your own authority to prey on maybe their insecurities or something. That's where people become
Right.
prey like, where they spot somebody who is potentially weaker than them in a given area, and they use that to their advantage knowingly to get them. Now that's much more of a character thing where I don't know what makes people become like that, necessarily,
Yeah.
where they become sort of that. I think if you can embody evil, that's pretty much it. It's just preying on people's insecurities to benefit yourself. Don't be evil. If you're not evil, then of course it makes sense for you to go out into the world and to be yourself and to try to make an impact. So obviously, if you're going to try to make an impact for people, you have to present the information and you have to provide them with the opportunity to latch onto the thing that you're doing. So, for example, using you as a representative to buy a piece of real estate, there's trust involved there. And there's, I get people calling me all the time being like, hey, can I buy your house? Hey, can I buy your house? And I'm just like, no, 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 and those are the types of people that, if you're doing too much of that, eventually you're going to hit somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily want to sell their house, but you're sort of persuading them into a boat where they do, and then they take on this. It's preying on the insecurities of, or triggering perhaps their insecurities. So that's sort of the dark side of influence. Preying on people's insecurities or accidentally triggering them. But in order to convince somebody to be part of your thing, there's a many layers to that too, and in really really good ways. And one of them is that well, first of all, a quick tip on persuading people. First of all, it's there's several different sides of persuasion. There's three different sides of persuasion. There's the emotional side of it, there's the logic side of it, and then there's the credibility side of it. Who's saying it, what they're saying make sense, and how does that make me feel? And the how does it make me feel part is the part where people will take on what it is that you want, that you're trying to connect with them over. And So part of that, again, going back to the self part, having part of being an influential person is having credibility to what you do, proof that you've done it, and all of those good things. The logic side of it really comes down to what's a good equation for the interaction to take place. So, in buying a house, if I want to get a really nice one bedroom studio apartment, I'm not going to go pay $1 million for it in the hood. You know what I mean? Like that
Right.
logically, that's just not good. And obviously, that makes me feel like I'm getting ripped off. It makes me feel scared that I'm going to spend all this money to go get something that's not so good. So, and so it's important to have the right formula for that interaction to take place on the logic side of things. But at the end of the day, sometimes people, if they get swept up in something and of how they feel, it doesn't matter if the logic's there or if the person's even 1,000% credible. Sometimes they'll latch on anyway because they feel whatever it is that's motivating them to feel that way, they'll go for it. How am I doing so far on this? Is this
Yeah, you're
ringing
doing
true?
great. And I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is exactly kind of what I wanted you to talk about and touch on. And I mean, maybe I think something else that a lot of people want to know is out of the three, right? Credibility, logic, and emotion. Is there a specific ranking, or does it depend on the person, or does it depend on,
Well, I mean, if there's what qualified Donald Trump to sell steaks? Nothing. It was
right? Yeah.
it was the credibility that he had as a and his Richie Rich character as
Hmm.
this person who's infinitely well, whatever it is that you want to describe him, that character that he embodies sells automatically other things. So one could argue that people who are very, very there are great salespeople out there, and you've never heard their name before. You know what I mean? They sell
Yeah.
millions of dollars every single year, and they don't need that kind of credibility in order to have the logic and emotion side of things to twist in their favor. I guess what I would say is pick one that really resonates with you. Being a magician, logic is almost out the window because the whole goal is to eliminate logic from the situation. So, but it definitely makes you feel a certain way. And it's certainly dependent upon a person to sit there and say, I am a magician, like I'm here to engage in this type of activity in a magical or mystical way. And so pick one and stick with it. If you're really good at emotionally riling up people, you know, that's a good thing to have too. But make sure that the logic and the credibility is there because if you oversell people on the emotional hype of it and they feel ripped off later, there's probably a weakness to each one of those. You know what I mean? If you have this great product that's very logical and just fantastic, and you even have the credibility to build that thing, but emotionally you can't win people over. It doesn't matter if you're the most credible person with the greatest product. You can't emotionally get people there. Unless there's a specific group of people that how to really resonate with. Either way, it plays into the emotion thing. So there's probably going to be one that you really is your primary, and then you've got your other ones that you're not so positive in. So pick yours. I don't think I can answer that question for people specifically. I would say, think on it for yourself for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's I think what I think as well, because it doesn't just depend on like who the person selling is. It also, in my opinion, will depend on who you're selling to, right? So like for me personally, I take credibility, um, like I put it pretty important. And sometimes it's actually difficult for me to even like trust my own logic and trust my own thinking. So if somebody's kind of selling me, I tend to listen to people, to specific people rather than specific situations, if that makes sense. So if I understand
Right.
this person's credible, I will listen to this person, right? And that's kind of the and dig into like why I'm doing a podcast. Like that's kind of the reason why I do a podcast, right? It's like it's more on
Okay.
the guest, right? If the guest is credible, then in my opinion, I would listen to this person, and I'll listen to everything they have to say because in my opinion, it's not like industry specific where people think it has to be industry specific based on what somebody's saying, but it's more like this person's philosophy and how can it be applied, right? And kind of tying back to what we were just talking
Sure.
about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, have you seen that as well? Kind of like when you're dealing with different audiences, or do you have a different opinion on that as well?
On what specifically? Say again.
That it depends on who your audience is, which one of the three will be the most important when it comes to selling: credibility,
Sure.
logic, or
Okay. Yeah.
emotion.
Sure. Okay. So I follow you. So I would say um For sure. I mean, like when I do magic for engineers,
Hmm.
all they care about is the light. Well, hold on, I got to
Right.
figure this thing out, and then like whatever. And that those are also the ones where like when you're really killing it for them, they're just like like they can't like it's sparking a different type of emotion. When you're doing magic for maybe at much more of like just like a really say just like a general party where there's a
Hmm.
mixed audience and maybe it's like a gala for a foundation or something like that, and I did something on stage and then I'm interacting with people afterwards. People are in such a fun frilly mood, they're much more emotion based, and the logic of it really like they're already ready to suspend the logic of it. They walk in ready to be like, oh, a magician, okay, let's keep the magic feel for the night. So I think different rooms, the environment, the container that you're in always impacts how you feel,
Hmm.
and that's one thing that I don't think that people really take into account of enough is their environment, how that influences the way that they think and feel and are motivated by things. I mean, we're talking about real estate. Real estate
Right.
implies that there's land, which is a form of environment, and a built thing on top of it that you go inside of. And there's many layers to environment. You know what I mean? Um, so I would say like, if you can master the environment thing and that's one thing that magicians do know is that if you, before the audience even steps through the door, you have to master that venue, that room that you're in. That is emotionally yours for the night. They are your guests walking in there, and I can set stuff up in the room ahead of time before they get there, or I can do just make sure that it looks nice and has a nice aesthetic feel to it. That is that's why real estate people do staging. They want people to walk into the house feeling
Right.
like it's already plug and play. They can latch onto the vision of who they will become when they move into that house, and so
Right.
um this is it's definitely different people respond to different things differently all the time anyway. So when it comes to the three, credibility, logic, and emotion, if you have a handle on how you play in each one, it's one of those big learning things where like you meet people who have been in their field for a long time and they know exactly where to go, exactly who to talk to, exactly how to move a conversation forward because they've done it so many different times and failed a lot of ways along the time too. I've had tricks go wrong and all of these things, and you'll learn things about it, and you got to continue to get better so that it just feels like you're walking into an airplane with a pilot who's had thousands of miles under his belt to be able to make that flight happen. You know?
Right. Yeah, and I like the point that you brought up about what you said about environments and how the audience perceives what's going to happen like from the beginning, right, or even before they walk into the room. Because like in sales and in marketing, there's like two different types of ways that you can get somebody on the phone or in a sales situation. One is the inbound lead where somebody comes to you either through a website or through some marketing that you've done through advertising. And the second one is the outbound, right? Where you're calling somebody else to try to convince them to do something. So I don't know, have you ever been in a situation where you're the ones kind of presenting a trick to somebody who wasn't necessarily there or like mentally there, or like were you ever in a position where you're trying to, well, not like force magic upon someone, but like you're inserting yourself and disrupting their day? Because I think that's the big difference is,
Well,
are you
that's a
disrupting
good.
or are they coming to you?
Sure. Well, the way that I see it is I'm infinitely charming, so why would they not want to talk to me? But there's a bit of that. You have to walk in there and be like, like there's a bit of that. Like it would be wrong of you to not offer something to somebody if they can get value out of it and they would enjoy themselves, kind of a thing. Why not offer it to them? You know what I mean? And of course, we're going to get disruptions anyway. There's phones pinging. There's stuff that just, there's boulders that fall down from the mountain and
Right.
rip up the road. There's going to be something influencing our day no matter what. I don't think that people should be apologetic for going up to people. I've gone up to thousands and thousands and thousands of people in my life, interrupting their conversation, getting them to latch onto something that is arguably trivial. It's a grown man doing magic tricks for a living, and it's like, it's one of those things where like, you have to believe that even if the interaction doesn't go your way, that what you were doing was still valid. It was still worth it for you to sit there and take the time to disrupt that conversation. So like the other day, I was doing magic at an event, and there was a group of guys there. I was like, "Hey, what's up? Like whatever. Like you guys want to see some mad? I'm the entertainer here. Like let's do this. And trying to amp up the thing." And they were just like, "Nope." And I was like, and I couldn't tell if they were joking at first or not. And it's one of those things where I was just like, "Well, does he speak for the rest of the group?" And the rest of them were like, "Yep." And I'm like, "All right, cool. See you guys later." And like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, "Please watch my magic show."
Right.
Like what it would be
Yep.
like, even though I'm being paid to be there, it's they don't want to see it. They don't want to see it. I don't know what they were doing. And so it was definitely more important than what I was doing. There's other like another night I was doing magic for people, and there was one person wants to see magic a lot. The other person was like, like why am I now? My friend just looped me into this thing,
Right.
but 3 minutes into it, boom, the person who was very not wanting to be involved suddenly is just like, okay, yes, I get like
Mhm.
don't rub it in. I totally want to watch now. You know what I mean? Like don't
Yeah.
play off the fact that like I didn't want to watch it first. Like now I'm into it. Like let's do this kind of a thing. So whatever it is that people's like initial people have a feeling of resistance for many different reasons, and it's not necessarily up to us to fully understand it, but we do need to make the space for people to voice a no and to take the no and to move on. So
Right, exactly. And I think that's where a lot of people come in where they're afraid of the no. And I mean, I don't think you should be afraid of it, right? Because it's part of it, but you can't force yourself when somebody says no. So like, I mean, kind of like in your perspective of doing what you do, I think there's a lot of people just out in the world who might think that magic isn't providing any value. I'm sure there's people that have said that it's just like a trick, and it's not. Your job is to trick people, but you're still able to come in and essentially assert yourself as somebody who is providing value and helping somebody essentially better their days, right? So I think a lot of real estate agents, a lot of salespeople struggle with it, is that they always think that they're the ones that are manipulating somebody to do something for them so they can make money. But maybe you can kind of touch on, like, from your perspective, how have you been dealing with it, or how have you dealt with it in the past? Where have you ever had doubts of, should you present a magic trick or should you not approach somebody? Or what are some of the ways that you've
sure.
kind of dealt with that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I mean, magic is, you're right. I mean, there's something trivial about it. But all art in that sense is trivial. The movies is trivial, like, but
Right.
art is about the expression of truth in creative ways. And in my particular field, it's about creating illusionary stories using the real magic around us. The reality itself is magical enough.
Mhm.
What I'm doing is taking these things that are just around us and doing something amplified on top of it that arguably looks and feels impossible and gives people a moment of astonishment that they may take with them to their grave. They may tell the story about that magician
Right.
that they met many years ago, and a story like that makes them feel that way is very, very powerful. And so, in that right, human beings are magic seeking creatures. We want to feel like something magical and hopeful is taking place.
Right.
So I don't think that what I do is it's trivial in a fun way to make fun of myself, but I do believe in the power of magic in that right. And so in that way, with people who are making sales, like if a roof salesman comes to my house and is just like, "Hey, we're doing other roofs in the area. Can we do your roof?" I may not necessarily need it at that time, but there is a time when I may need it down the road, and so there is no, there's, if you, this is where the non-attachment to an outcome really matters, is
Mhm.
because I could try to do a trick and it could completely fail, but was it worth trying? Like, was it worth trying to hopefully get it? And even then, even if the moment does go really, really well, it may fade in those people's hearts as time goes on. So was it worth it then? So I think we could play the game of why we shouldn't do something, and we will always come up with a reason why not. So I think we need to just make sure that we have a good, strong understanding of why specifically we're doing something and what value we bring to people. And then it will instantly open it up to why we should be approaching somebody that we've never met before and making an offer to them or building rapport with them and things like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah, definitely. There's the excuses. They come, hard and fast, right? Everybody has plethora of excuses for why they shouldn't do something. A lot of it comes from fear. But I think, something you've also mentioned earlier in our interview as well is, if you're okay with yourself and if you work on yourself first, where you're providing some kind of value, and it really comes from like your personal intentions, right? Like, what is your actual real intentions? And there's nobody else in the world that knows that aside from yourself. So if you have the right intentions, does that, in my opinion, does that kind of trump everything else, that all the different excuses, because you have the right intentions. And even if somebody says no, even if somebody is rude to you, right? Even like that example of, the party that was seemingly very rude, who just said no, and you just moved on because you came from essentially the right intention of, hey, I want to help you, but if you don't want it, I'm still okay with it because I came from the right place, and it doesn't really matter what you
Right.
think, right?
Well, it's funny because that group, they were really just saying a direct no. I've approached groups where they say yes, but they do it in the sense of like almost like let's mess with the magician kind of a thing. And then they'll sit there and be like, oh, I'll tell them a fake name, and then this person lies about the card that they have, and it just becomes this game amongst them to mess with me when I'm sitting here trying to give them my form of human expression, and they're just sort of
Right.
toying with it because they don't, for whatever the motivation is, whether that's the culture types of friends that they are or whatever. So that's why it's also like important to know when your gifts are not appreciated, even if at first it seems like they are. Some people may do. That's how we define a heckler. Really, is somebody
Right.
who's trying to overtake the situation. So, I mean, the same thing can go for people in sales. Sometimes people don't have the gumption to just tell you no, and so they'll string you along for a long time. And instead of just giving you a hard no, they feel bad with it, or they whatever the motivation is to not give you the right answer that is right for the interaction. They just don't do it. So, and
Right.
again, you can't take any of these things that happen so personally that it cripples you from moving on and growing.
Right. That's actually a really good point that you brought up again. And I didn't even expect this, because, and it makes so much sense now, because, as a performer, you get hecklers, right? You get, in marketing industry, you call it haters, right? Because a lot of
Mm.
agents put out YouTube videos, social media, they're online, and they get hateful comments, they get hecklers. So in your opinion, what's the best way to kind of deal with it? Do you retaliate? Do you retaliate in a nice way so other people can see the person you are, because you're always going to be seen, or do you just ignore it? I mean, I guess those are the three different
I
ways you
think
can
there's
go.
a lot of ways to handle it. I mean, one is to just straight up ignore it and just plow through it, just like it,
Yeah.
like don't take it on and just keep going. Not like don't pretend like it never happened, but like clearly that just happened. I'm not going to let it enter my sphere, and I'm just going to keep going.
Right.
Another option is to silence the whatever the hater, the heckler, the opposition, whatever that is. And that could be done by, in an online world, you can just delete comments, you can block them, that type of thing.
Right.
If you're live in a room with people and you got a heckler right there, I mean, on the one hand, it's the same thing where, well, the nice thing about being in a room and somebody's being disruptive, you can just sit there and be like, hey, everybody, is this person being disruptive? And obviously they're going to be like, yes. Be like, well, it sounds like everybody wants you to stop doing this thing, like whatever. And it's just the kind of thing where they become more conscious about what they're doing. That actually happened a few weeks ago at a very great event. It was a great event. And this guy was just kept being like, well, let me see the cards. And it was just like one of these things where it's just like, dude, shut up.
Yeah.
It was like, I understand that I don't know what it is that, and I think I said it that way. I was like, I don't know what's motivating you to be like this. And all of his friends just started laughing, like whatever. And he just stopped after that. And I didn't want to like, I don't want him to feel, on the one hand, I need him to shut up. And on the
Right.
other hand, I don't want him to feel bad either. But there is something about I guess perhaps that macho, who's alpha in the situation is sort of like taking fold. And I am like, if you're gonna like, even if you're gonna sit there and be like really disruptive, I'm just gonna walk away and feel good within myself and just let you do whatever it is that you're doing here. Um, but so there is that sort of way that we're like, you can try to either shut them down with like, and you watch some comedians shut down hecklers, and sometimes it gets brutal, and the way that they go about shutting down hecklers. I Magic is the kind of thing where like there's the types of hecklers. If they are, it's very rare to get that type of like at a comedy show type of heckler, but they do happen, and it's usually better to let the mob take care of the one instead of just, because then there is that, like, the moment you break the boundary of like, okay, I'm gonna flex on this person, if I have the rest of the show to go through and somebody's nervous, oh, they saw that interaction later, they're going to be nervous for themselves to interact with me, because what if they say something that sparks something, like that sparks something, you know what I mean, that they didn't intend to, and
Right.
so they become self-conscious about just trying to have fun, and that's the one thing that I don't want to have happen. So
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because I've seen different examples of that where somebody is they're very aggressive and not necessarily like they're coming from a point where like they're trying to kill everybody in their sight, but like they're very energetic. They have a very, I guess, alpha power kind of energy about them, and it just makes it almost like, is this person even approachable, right? Versus somebody else who's more approachable, they might not shut everybody down, but there's still different ways to deal with it. So I guess like, do you think it's a necessary skill set for somebody to have? Is to kind of have that kind of alpha energy and be able to in a situation just kind of shut a heckler down or shut somebody who's just clearly trying to disrupt your situation for whatever motivation that they have. And if you have it, what's like the best way to contain and control it and not just let it run wild where it can even be off-putting to other potential people who could be opportunities for sales or your situation audience members.
right, well, I mean, well, first of all, somebody who's going out of their way to be disruptive because they want to be the center of attention, whatever it is that's motivating them to be like, I have to mess with this person who's on stage or right in who's come into our group and is socializing with all of us, trying to entertain everybody. Something's triggering them to want to act like that. I don't know what it is.
Right.
They may find me annoying. They may have been in a group of a store, whatever it is that's making them feel like they need to attack me. Like that's not like it's not really about like in their situation. I mean, it's not, they are trying to establish some sort of dominance. There's always going to be somebody who's dominant within a room. That's just how human beings
Right.
work. There's always an energetic nucleus of the room or several layers of socialized power. So you can't eliminate that. That is something that is present, and there's the male and female dynamic, and there's lots of different ways that sort of plays that is almost indescribable and in every way. But for people who are interacting with a heckler, I mean, if you're trying to, so the question was, is it good to have that authority of like alphaness?
Right.
Was that
Yeah.
the,
Do you
yeah.
need to
I
always
mean,
be in power? It's kind
I
of like
mean,
in
for
the
me,
situation.
well, for me, I mean, as a magician, I mean, like, as long as, again, coming back to something that I can always control, what if I want to do a magic trick for a bunch of unsuspecting people? I want to make something float and no one knows
Right.
how it happened. Obviously I'm in control of a situation and they're not knowing it, and I may not reveal I'm the magician who made that thing float. There, at no point does it really matter when something amazing is happening. You know what I mean? For me as a performer, when I'm going in there as a showman, you do have to be able to attain your authority and also recognize the moments where it's just not appreciated
Mhm.
for whatever it is, and like that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, if someone's being very disruptive and everyone else is into it, cool. I'm going to sit there and I have to interact with this person, and something's got to go down. Obviously I'm not going to sit there and start throwing punches, but if but there is going to be punches with words of just like, there's a chess game of emotion happening. That's a lot different than a situation where everybody, like I said earlier, everybody's sitting there in on let's mess with the magician. Clearly, you have no power or authority within that circle. They don't appreciate what you're doing. Why even bother to try to win them over in any way? Just walk away. You know, I get paid
Yeah.
either way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think I mean, in that second situation that as an agent or as a salesperson, you kind of probably did something wrong in the marketing, right? In the beginning, because you have a little bit more control over who you can have listening to your presentations, who's coming into your open houses if you're hosting one of those. So I think it's important to kind of realize that you not always have to be in a position of quote unquote power, or you're not in a position where to be able to influence people, right? You don't always have to be seen as the dominant force or the dominant individual in a group of people to be able to have influence on others. Would you say
Right.
that's That's correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if I go to like so like I go networking fairly often where I go to like events where I get to meet people who potentially either I'm meeting people in the just in the community to tell them about my local show, or I'm going to meet event planners to try to get them to hire me to go to an event and things like that. You know, there's if I go to any group of people, there's only going to be so many people within that group of people who really like me enough to do business with me. And so how much of that is really, you know, I could go and do my magic, but after that, the sales aspect of it, you know, there's if there's only one person who really latched onto me, I'm good with that because that means that that person really wants to do business with me. I don't need to, and I could be in a room full of other performers. Maybe it's a conference of entertainers, and there's agents there who sell entertainment to corporate buyers. You know, that's kind of like how my industry works.
Right.
So, you know, if there's other performers there, you know, they may like a variety of different things there. You know, you can't always determine who's going to like you and for what you're offering and everything. But as long as you definitely know that when you're in that social group, who are the people who are latching onto this? You know, those are the people that you've really connected with. You know, and that's the goal of persuading and influencing people is you know you're looking to make a connection where there's an exchange of something happening, you know. And you know, again, persuasion is ultimately about how you make people feel, and then there just happens to be logic attached to that. So you know, definitely, like, I mean, I would definitely recommend if you have trouble with, you know, making your sales pitch or understanding who's really going to latch onto what it is that you have to offer, you know, going networking to different types of groups of people just to meet people, give your one sentence pitch about who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and what outcome you create. That will show you and reveal to you who people see you as, who how you're trying to become, how it's coming across to people, and that gives you really good learning ground. You know, if you go to a couple of networking events every single month, not only do you expand your network, but you hone in on your message. You get to really, you know, become part of a group. You know.
Right. Definitely. Like the more, I mean, it goes back to like a very simple kind of a very simple law, which is like, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And then obviously with magic, you have that experience as well. Like the more you practice the trick, the easier it gets and the more kind of second nature it is for you to be able to perform that seamlessly versus somebody doing it the first time. Obviously they could have beginner's luck or whatever, but if you do it more times, you'll get better at it. So I think that's a really good message to leave it here. Yeah, that's awesome, David. Thank you so much for kind of helping us out with your perspective on what influence and persuasion is, from an expert's kind of point of view. For our listeners out there who have learned a lot and have gotten value from you today, what are some good ways that they can reach out to you? What are some things that you might have coming up, either online or in
Sure.
person because you're traveling?
Sure. So yeah, so I mean, if you're, I tend to hang around the Midwest a lot because I'm kind of just a Midwestern
Mhm.
guy. So you know, my hometown Chicago, I'm there all the time doing events there, and sometimes I'll host my show there. I've been living in Indianapolis, and I have a show here, monthly ticketed show that you can come to. Otherwise, more importantly, it's you know, I mean, real estate people. If there's people listening, I speak to real estate agents. Often I perform at events for, you know, Coldwell Bankers and Remax and all this stuff, and so you know, if you're having some kind of a regional event and you need a speaker or entertainer, you know, definitely reach out to me. You go to my website, David Ranalli, RANALLI.com, and you can check out my stuff. Connect with me on social media, and would love to interact with you. I also do plan on doing my show, The Art of Influence, in a virtual format. So if you want to experience that show and to hear more about influence and persuasion in a magical way. You know, keep an eye out for that because I plan to bring it into a virtual format. So, you know, following me on social media would be a good way to stay in touch on that. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be in touch with that for sure. So if you guys are
awesome.
interested, yeah, if you guys are interested in that, if you guys want to learn more from David about some different things he's doing, some different things he's bringing value to different professionals and entrepreneurs and salespeople around the world, make sure to check that out and follow him. If you guys have gotten a lot of value today from this podcast, in particular, make sure to give it a like, a subscribe, a follow if you're listening to it on Apple Podcast or watching it on Spotify or wherever you might be listening or consuming this podcast. And definitely, if you feel like there's somebody in your circle, in your sphere that will benefit from this, make sure to just pay the quote unquote pay the price and pay it forward and share it with them so they can get this value as well. But other than that, David, is there anything you want to leave with the audience here today before we sign off?
Maybe we should do a quick trick, huh?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah,
We
if
can,
you,
you and I could do a trick right here. Is it
yeah,
mostly listeners, or are they going to be seeing this online as well?
they will be seeing this on Spotify for sure.
They be
It,
seeing it. Okay, cool,
yeah.
excellent, cool. So I have a super simple trick that we can actually do here. And actually, I'm not going to show you the faces of the cards because I don't want you to think that I'm trying to influence you already.
Okay, awesome.
But what's going to happen is I'm going to turn over a single card inside of this deck of cards, inside the box. And I'll do that in 1 second, or what for 1 second. Just give me a second here. I'm going to do that. Okay, great. All right, so I turned over a single card inside of this deck of cards. My goal is to influence you to think of the card that I want you to think of. I'm going to give you a hint here. It's not the Ace of Spades. It's not the Queen of Hearts, and it's not the Joker. Okay, it's a really random card. Look right here at my hand. Okay, go. And I want you to, on the count of three, a single card is going to come to your mind. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One card should be in your mind right now. Do you have that card?
I do.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So if this works and I spread through here, that will be the card that you were thinking of. So you could say it for the first time for the audience. What was the card?
The K of Spades.
What's that?
The King of Spades.
The King of Spades. King of Spades. Okay, cool. Because I'm not gonna do anything. I'm gonna keep the cards completely in view this entire time, and you're gonna see that there is in fact that one card that is reversed. You said King of Spades. There it is. The King Spades. You were thinking. Boom.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. So if you guys are listening to this, definitely check out the video version of it on Spotify because that was an awesome trick, David. Thank you so much for doing that. And
yeah, no problem. I'm glad. Yeah, well, nice way to end. So cool. Well, I hope everybody got a lot of value out of this. I appreciate you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, David. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Listeners, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.